Have you always dreamed about writing a book, launching, publishing it, but you feel overwhelmed with all of the steps? Or maybe you have a podcast and you were told that you could easily transform a podcast into a book. Well, on today's episode, I'm going to be talking to someone who has years of working with business owners and entrepreneurs and how she can tell the story of their lives in a way that helps them monetize their business, grow their outreach, and also make meaningful connections. Michelle Prince is a best-selling author, a motivational speaker, publishing expert, and also the CEO and founder of the Performance Publishing Group. She has, through her mission, helped thousands of entrepreneurs share their story and make a meaningful impact in the world. She has helped thousands become published authors through her consulting, her events, and also her best-selling book, Winning in Life Now. In the past, she co-hosted The Ziglar Show that, as you can imagine, has millions of downloads and is listened throughout the whole world. And she hosts her own show. It's called The Power of Authority Spotlight, in which she talks to business owners and leaders making an impact in the world. And so today, I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about things that you want to know. So throughout this interview, you should be taking notes because Michelle's going to delve into exactly what types of books you can author and how easy it really can be to start your own. So let's dive into this interview. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. I love your brand. I love who you are as a person. I do think that you break the stereotype of the publisher who's scary, who is like, you know, what do you see in the movie? Someone is like trying to get their manuscript to a publishing company and they're mean and they're like saying no. And the moment people meet you, there's something about you. There's like an aura of positivity and just you're very approachable and you care deeply about people and making a positive impact. So you definitely make people feel comfortable when they meet you.
Thank you. Can you just come with me every day and say those things to me wherever
Yeah,
I go?
happy to be your hype girl. I'm happy to be
There
your
you
hype girl.
go. There you go. No,
And
thank you.
I think that also it just like you're a very confident speaker and you've been in the business for so many years. I'd like to just like go straight to what people want to hear about. In all of your years of experience in the publishing company, working with small business owners and big names, do people need to be a straight A student to write a book?
No. Oh my goodness. If they did, I wouldn't be an author. You know, everyone, all you need is a story, and your story is your experience. So an editor is going to make anybody's story read well. So don't ever worry about, being a great writer. You don't have to be a great writer to be an author.
That's wonderful. And so a question that I got was, how do you know that you have a good story? How do you work with authors and business owners to figuring out exactly what makes sense for them, for their business long term, how you can monetize your business long term through that one story?
Yeah. Well, first of all, everyone has a story, truly. And most people don't believe it, but if you really think about all the things that you're passionate about, all the experiences that you have, I mean, you literally are your story. And most people are talking about it either personally or professionally, and they don't even know it. But that's the first thing, is recognizing that no matter who you are, where you come from, you have a story and it matters. Even if it matters to one person, it's worth telling. But one of the ways that we help authors to figure out, well, what is my story? Because frankly, there's no limit to the things you could write about because we have so many different interests and talents and things like that. What we start with is helping people to get clarity on their passions and their experiences and figuring out where there's a connection between the two, because you want to write a book that you want to write, right? That's where the passion comes in. But you also want to write a book where you have the credibility and the expertise behind it. And so that's one of the ways that we help authors to, first and foremost, is get clarity on who they are and what is their story.
So that's wonderful because a lot of people, especially I feel like people who have amazing stories are the ones who are so humble and like, oh no, nobody wants to hear about my
Right.
story, right? And you come in and you're like, oh my God, I see that. This is something that people would connect with. And sometimes as much as you know about yourself and living your life, you just can't see that through someone else's eyes and see how impactful that is.
Yeah. I felt the same way before I wrote my book in 2009. I mean, I really had a different mindset of like, well, who am I to write a book? I'm not at the pinnacle of my career, and I haven't achieved something so great. But the reality is your story, if you think about it, it's really just intended to help someone, whether it's to teach them, motivate them, encourage them, help them overcome the obstacle you just went through. It's really just the same. And a lot of that is you're probably sharing with friends and neighbors and colleagues anyway. But it's getting over that you have to be at some level in order to share your story in a book. You don't. You just have to have the desire to want to share what you know to help someone else.
So, and that's such a good point. Just helping someone else, right? That's what helps us all move through. When we take away our, I would say, like, of course, when everyone says, oh, maybe I would like to write a book someday, and it's a little bit of ego. But at the same time, when you're writing a book, it's the opposite that's happening. You just get imposter syndrome all the time. You're like, why am I writing this? Who cares? So it's actually mentally a very interesting thing that happens. And you are, and I have that notes here, you are a human behavior consultant. You're certified in that. So actually, I'm sure like you have an interesting take on how that happens and how you work with people to get out of that mindset.
It's so funny. No matter who you are, or male, female, successful, just getting started, everyone has a little bit of that imposter syndrome because we're so close to our story. We're so close to what just comes natural to us. Some people are just naturally inclined to business, and they've done very well, and they've started and run and sold businesses. And it just doesn't even occur to them that maybe somebody would love to know how they did that. Or maybe somebody's just naturally an incredible nurturer, caring mother or father or something. And it doesn't occur to them that they could share something that could maybe help a new mom. So I think all of us suffer from a little bit of that imposter syndrome, some more than others. I think women tend to have a little bit more of it than men, but it's there. And that's where it goes back to writing a book. It isn't about you, and it feels like it because it's your book. But really, it's, if you think about it, what is the purpose of the book? It's for the reader, and it's for them to gain some knowledge or some understanding or a tutorial or, a lesson that you learned. So it's not as self-seeking as it seems. It's just getting out of our own head to realize that our story, when we keep it to ourselves, that's really the tragedy, because then we're not helping anyone.
Absolutely agree. And so today, I feel like today we have so many more tools to tell our story in chunks, in bits. Like social media, everyone writes social media, writes blog posts, they do podcasts. Yeah. And yet when it's time to write, they're like, ooh, what a challenge. So tell me how you help, especially podcasters, because you were telling me the other day, oh, I see a trend where people are using that podcast as a way to write manuscripts for their book. So tell me exactly how, if someone is feeling a little overwhelmed with all of this, what are the kind of like what's the starting point?
Yes. And I always say it's not about a book, it's about your story. So how can you get that story out to as many people as possible? And for some, writing comes naturally and it's easier for them. And then you can start with the book. I mean, as a publisher, I believe starting with the book is the easiest way because it'll open those other doors. But you can easily take that same content and do a webinar. You could do a blog post. Podcasting, I love. Podcasting to me is we are just sharing our stories with each other right now. That's all it is. And I think that's why people love podcasting, is it's just real people sharing either what's worked or what hasn't worked. And that's really, think of that same concept, but when you put it in a book, you're going to touch people that maybe would never listen to a podcast. I mean, clearly there's demographic differences. Somebody under the age of 30 is going to be listening to a podcast, an audiobook, long before they pick up a physical book. So thinking of your audience, but what if you only wrote a book and missed out on podcasting? You'd miss so many more people that you could impact, and vice versa. So you have to kind of look at it as, how can I build my authority and which platform do I start with? But it shouldn't just end with one.
And that's so true. And also, as a strategist here at the podcast space, we work with business owners to figure out exactly how to work their story into a connection with their listener. And through podcasting, it's a very intimate relationship, is one-on-one. It's the same that happens with books. Most people don't sit around the fire and like read a book with friends. Actually, there's podcasts that do that. So that's an interesting concept. But by default, most people have that one-on-one experience. So it's really easy to transition. But I will say, I listen to podcasters. Denise Duffel Thomas is one of them. She's the money mindset coach. And she is wonderful at repurposing her content because she thinks like this. Okay, someone who is consuming my social media content is receiving my content on microdoses. My podcast is being listened to, but they may be multitasking. When
Yes.
they read my book, it's a fully immersive experience. So even though it's the same content, and she did the books first, and then she kind of repurposed some sections into social media and podcast episodes, but she will say it in a way where she says, I delve more into that like in my book. So
Yes.
it's just a different tweak, and then you just go in more depth on the book. Or maybe you do a podcast episode after you released a book and you say, you know what, that didn't make it to the edit, but I want to tell you about this. So actually the podcast, your social media, your book, it's an ecosystem to your online brand, to your brand just in general in your business. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, right? Like you can literally take the manuscripts and just say, hey, we're lightly editing this, or just expand. So it's very flexible, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's what I say. Don't recreate the wheel, just repurpose. And some of the best, Zig Ziglar was my mentor, and that's what he did. He wasn't saying something new every time he went, but sometimes it takes multiple times to hear something to really understand it and retain it. And one other thing I'm very aware of too, maybe because I'm a human behavior consultant, but learning styles, we all learn differently. Some people consume content or really understand content best when they read it. Other people, it's when they hear it. Other people, it's when they, maybe they work with a one-on-one coach, or maybe they learn best when they go to a conference and they're kind of immersed in it. So if you didn't take your content and get it out to all those different learning styles, you're just missing this opportunity to help more people. And you're not recreating the wheel every time. It's the same thing, just repurposed for that particular audience. So that's what I recommend in building your platform. That's key.
I love that. And that's so true. I mean, I love being reminded when I follow someone whose book I bought. Oh yeah, that chapter. I need, like, they talk about it on a social media post. Of course, like that was such a good moment. Like I have to go back and like highlight it. Or audiobooks, right? You also do audiobooks through your publishing company.
We do, yes. In fact, I believe every nonfiction book should have an audiobook now because of that. Personally, I listen to audiobooks, especially when I'm traveling. That's my go-to, when it's driving or even on an airplane. I just enjoy an audiobook, but I still buy a physical book. So I'm a little weird that way, but many people, the demographics have gone up so much. The number of downloads of audiobooks has skyrocketed in the last couple of years. So if you write a book and you put all this effort into it, or you start a podcast, or you do a digital course, and you have all of this awesome thought leadership, and you don't do an audiobook, you're again missing out on so much of the population that's going to contain or absorb content that way.
Yeah, and I was just reading your book last night, kind of like reading it because actually you and I worked together many years ago,
Yes, I
and
know.
and I remember reading passages of it, and I was like, it's so true. You have these quote, people will throw business cards in the trash, but will never throw a book because it's of value. So tell us a little bit
So
about
true.
why people should get. And you have a little cute one. I don't know if you have anything around where you are to show us.
I do. My business card is actually a book, and it's this is a book called "Your Book Is Your Business Card," because I believe this with all my heart. And it's true. Think about the last networking event you went to. Even if you had the best of intentions of following up, chances are good you threw some business cards in the trash or a brochure. We don't. It just is a natural, right? But we don't throw away books. And just test me on this. Maybe some people do, but majority don't. But think about on your bookshelf right now. Do you have any books that you have not read and you may never read, but they're still on your bookshelf?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Because there's something about a book that we value. And I've seen it over and over. And in fact, this little book here is what I've been using for the last several years. Whenever I go out speaking or networking, I trade business cards. They get this and I get their business card. And there's enough good information in here that even if they never contact me, they've received something valuable from me. But hopefully the natural inclination is they'll want to reach out. And We've had so many publishing clients through the years who sign up with our program. And then I'll ask them, how did you hear about us? And they say, oh, well, you spoke to our group about 4 years ago. You gave out your business card and it's been sitting on my desk ever since. I couldn't throw it away. And
I love
that's,
that.
for me, marketing, right? That's the beauty of it. So when you think of your book as your business card, think of it as your door opener. And it's never going to be about the book. It's about the content. It's about who you are. And people want to work with the expert. And when you write a book, you are seen as the credible expert. You're seen as the authority. And it's why my book is titled The Power of Authority. And it's actually a play on words. You can't spell authority without author. So it's one of the ways to build your authority very quickly.
Yeah, because you were sharing on your story and you've seen this time and time again. And I mean, just unconsciously, I think like everyone listening to this right now, just think about like pause this video after these questions and just like think about it. When was the last time that you read someone's bio and it says author of or best? You don't even need to say like best selling author, just the fact it has author, you're like, okay, this person is the real deal, right? And that can further your career, fast track it on so many ways. So tell me a little bit about how that has happened with authors you work with or just business
Yes.
owners.
Well, a couple things. One, a mutual friend of ours, Jeff Crilly, who is in the publicity PR industry and, past media or TV anchor, has said many times that, when you're an author, you're talk show worthy or you're media worthy in a way, because think about it, when somebody's going to put you on TV or on the radio or on a podcast, they want to know that you are a credible expert. And so it's a little bit of a check, they've written a book, right?
Yes.
So that's one thing. But also for those people that want to do speaking, I mean, one of the easiest ways to get on stages is by having a book. Because again, think of a meeting planner. Their job is to put on an incredible event by hiring or paying, awesome speakers. They're not just going to put anyone on that stage, but authors tend to be, again, speaker worthy or event worthy to bring them on a stage worthy is probably a better way of saying that. And it's a phenomenon I can't really explain, but it is very true. We just place a lot of credibility toward authors. It's almost like it's proof in the pudding because they've written a book, they must be good at what they do.
Absolutely. And it's just thinking through, some of our clients are working with you now to write their first book, which is I'm so excited about.
I am too.
And it's funny because it just there's a lot of talk about the growth mindset and the scarcity mindset, right? And then when you are struggling to become an authority, just even writing a book will be difficult because you're fighting against yourself and like, no, I have something to say. However, I feel like even working with, you have ghostwriters, you have people who can guide the future author. How do you call actually like the future, not future author? How would they be called?
Well, one of the things I always tell our authors when they're writing the book in their email signature line to put author of the forthcoming book, because the moment you start writing a book, you are actually an author. You don't have to have it in your hand. But it is the forthcoming book.
Okay, I see. So that's okay. The author of the forthcoming book. There you go. I can't even get it right. Anyway, so let's think about it like that. When you're going through the process of writing a book, you're getting to know yourself a bit better.
Yes.
You're kind of like being reminded of your achievement, things you've overcome. And just going through that process reminds you of your growth as a professional, as just a person in general. And I feel like if you're trying to transition into speaking gigs, you're way more comfortable in your skin because you're like, you can read my story in my book. And you have like, kind of like it's like a little like cane to help you move, right? Like you're like, okay, like if you'd like to know more, there's my book. Or you just have like that safety net. You're like, I have something to show to people, right?
Zig Ziglar used to say it's not necessarily about a book either, but it's kind of who you become as a result of writing a book, because you get so much clarity. I mean, we all have so many things that we can share with someone personally or professionally to help them. But when you write a book, you get that clarity. You almost see it for yourself, like, wow, maybe I do have something to say. There's my one of my favorite things we do is we do a lot of collaborative books, compilation books, where we have multiple authors writing one chapter, and they're only 3,000 words. They're super simple, but most people when they get started are like, I can't write 3,000 words. I have nothing to say. And then we help them get started and give them some tips. And then almost every single time we'll get a call back like, oh my gosh, I got started and I'm already at 6,000 words.
I love
And
that.
because you realize, wow, I have a lot more to say than I thought I did. And one of the clues, if you're not really sure, is think about when you're with a friend, when you're with a family member, when you're with somebody you care about, and they're asking you for advice. What are they asking you about? I imagine for you, it's tell me about podcasting, or how did you get started? And I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Where? But I have no idea where to start. Those are all little clues, and you're doing it all the time anyway. A book is just helping you to get clarity on what that specifics are, but then also adding that authority status to what you're doing.
I love that. And it's just like, yeah, like that kind of a compilation book. And I've seen as a podcast producer, I've actually had a ton of people bring their book and they're like, hey, I'm part of this book. And actually people love that because it's like, hey, tell me about your story. And they know that it's going to be, there's other things. So if you're like unsure, that's a great way to start. But podcast hosts they're still going to book you on their show about that too. And actually, would you mind giving us a little bit of rundown of like what are the different types of books that people could write?
Yes, good question. And and the key is you don't have to write a full book to be considered a published author. Literally, a chapter in someone else's book, you get the exact same benefits as published author that you do for your own book. A mini book, these little business card books that we do, same thing. It's about 3,000 to 5,000 words, but you're a published author. I mean, it's published just the same way we would do a full book. So all of the benefits are there. The key is thinking about, what do you want to do with the book? What's the ultimate goal? Now, if you're a speaker, I recommend having these are great door openers if you want to do something quickly. But truly, the full book is a great way for people to take you home with them. I mean, if you think about it as a speaker, when you're up on a stage, and if you have something that could change someone's life, personally or professionally, don't you want to have them remember it? But the reality is we don't remember what we hear as much. But if they take your book home with them, that's that continuing learning and education that's going to help them to really make positive change in their life. So you want to have a book for that. But don't get hung up on the size of the book. You literally can write a chapter and still get all the benefits.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's say, you can co-author a book, and then what other styles can people go for? Because I feel like a lot of people don't know what they don't know. So let's give them a little bit of a hint, peek the curtain on what that could be.
Okay, so the very first place to start, easiest, is doing a chapter in someone else's book. You can co-author a book where it's just you and one other person, and they take half and you take half, or intermingled. I love to do the collaborative books where we have 15 to 20 different authors, and each one does one chapter. We have a series we're doing. I used to have a series called Dare to be a Difference Maker, and we did 8 volumes of that. And so everyone was just telling their story of how they're making a difference in their lives, in small ways. Now we have that same series, or a different series called Illuminate, difference makers shining through their story. And each chapter is somebody sharing their story of something that they learned, or something they've overcome, or something that they're helping to shine their light, essentially. So that's one way. Then the other way is considering doing something like a business card book, a mini book, where it's small enough. These tend to not be sold, or at least in my case, I give these away for free. Might be a little bit more of an investment than a business card, but like I said, if they're not going to throw it away and you can see it as a marketing tool, it is the best marketing dollars I've ever spent in everything I've ever done. Truly, in all the 12 years I've been in business, this little book has brought in more business for me than anything. And then, of course, there is, a full-size book. When I say full-size book, that's usually going to be an 8 to 12 chapter book that is, personal development, professional development. We only work with nonfiction authors. So when I tell those examples, that's really specific for that. Of course, there's other types of books you could do. But those are just some of the ways. I think the key is just don't wait, because the opportunities are attracted to the experts, right? And an author is considered the expert. If you want to get on podcasts, if you want to get in media, if you want to speak on stages, it's just one of the easiest ways to get you out there.
And I love that one idea about the business card book. Here's another reason why it's good to have an actual small book that people can read. If you're booking yourself on podcasts, you want the host to be able to go through your book as fast as possible so they can have a good understanding of who you are. It can be better prepared for the interview. If you have a smaller one, cheaper to ship, quicker to read, and just easy to just go through. They can even go through it as they're doing the show, which is amazing.
And if for speaking, if you think about it, when I go and speak, in fact, next week I'll be at an event with about 300 people. Can you imagine what it would cost to ship 300 of my full-size books? But I can throw these in a suitcase. Right. They're small enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's a practicality side to it, because even if you take them with you to a physical event, like you can take more books if they're smaller. So, I love that. Like small, handy dandy, can fit in your pocket. Okay, that's awesome.
I was looking for, I recently was interviewed or I was a guest on a podcast conference summit, but it was an online summit, and they brought in podcasters from all over. And I was just trying to think of the person's name, but there was somebody that was on there that was also interviewed, and they get over 15 million downloads a month on this show. Wow. And he was saying that the key, and again, I'm trying to forgive me for not having that top of mind, but he was saying that he will not bring on a podcast guest unless they've had a book. And I thought that was really interesting because, that's a lot of work for a podcaster to read somebody's book before bringing them on. But he said, if they don't have a book, first of all, they don't believe enough in their brand, right? They don't believe enough in what they do. If they did, they would have written a book. And two, it's if he cannot reference specific things to talk about that's what he does, is he literally doesn't even read the full book. He goes to the table of contents, says, okay, so let's talk about what does it mean to, getting it out of your head and onto paper. What is that? That's one of my things on my table of contents here. And I thought that was really brilliant, and just reinforces the fact that if somebody who has such a huge name in the podcasting industry with a huge show won't bring on anyone unless they're an author, we need to be listening to that. And
absolutely,
what's the fastest way for you to become an author? If it's a mini book, just do a mini book.
I love that. That's so good, and great reminder that if you're trying to grow your brand through podcasting as a host or a guest, by the way, that's how you should do it. You should do a combination of both to reach your current audience and warm them up, and also reach new audiences that already would be easily converted into your own audience. So just thinking about it as multi-purpose, if you want to do a speaker, it's kind of like looking at this as, think about, and I kind of hate this question or this thought that think about where you want to be in 5 years from now, because I feel like it's so overwhelming for some people, and like to myself, I'm like, I have like 5,000 ideas every other month. Yeah. So but if you don't have an idea, I think it's kind of like thinking about, okay, I want to start a podcast. You start a podcast, and then through the podcast you get content for the book, and from the book you can write a book, and then you can be booked more easily on speaking events. So I think that can be like an easy transition, or blogging. If you've blogged already, I mean, it's so easy to convert that into a book. So it makes sense if you're wanting to progress in your career. It makes it easier doing it like that.
I love podcasting for that. We're actually partnering with some podcasters and a podcasting company because you're spending all of that upfront energy figuring out what your branding is. What is the show about? who are the top, or what are the topics, and who am I interviewing, and all of that. But in that process, you're really getting clear on your core content. So what we're doing is taking those, take a podcast. Of course, you have some strategy behind what you do on the podcast, but then literally taking those, recording those, transcribing those, and using that as the basis of a manuscript. So if you don't have time to write a book and you're podcasting, then you're killing two birds with one stone. You have to have the right resources on the publishing and editing side to do that. But it's one of the ways that we're helping a ton of podcasters get them done quickly, because you've already clarified your message.
So, okay, I have like three questions that came to mind. I'm going to try to not forget about this. We're going to be
Okay.
talking a little bit about your podcast and how you pivoted
Hmm.
to a new kind of like a new season. However, I'd like to touch on exactly how long does it take to write a book, and of course it has like the premise of depends on how slow or how fast you can write it if you have manuscripts already. But let's say like what's the bare minimum time that people should like lock in their timeline to expect to write work with you and then publish it and all of that looks
You
like.
know, once you have clarity on the message, it shouldn't be that difficult to get it written pretty quickly. And the reason this is for nonfiction. Anything you would put into a book, personal, professional development, it's in your head. The hardest part is getting it out of your head and organized. Like, okay, I have all of these ideas, but what is that? So that's really the first thing. Then once we get that really solid outline of, you know, this chapter, the sub chapters, the stories within the chapters, then it's just a matter of sitting down and either writing, typing, or just recording yourself. And many books are not written; they're actually recorded. My second book, Busy Being Busy, I I literally just recorded myself at speaking engagements and then recorded that, transcribed that, and used that as the basis of the manuscript. And then I just added some stuff here and there, but that's really the key because it should come out pretty quickly. Give you some ideas. My first book I wrote in 3 weeks. Now, it took me 13 years to get the clarity on what the book was about. So I'm not going to say I wasn't actively thinking of it, but I'd been thinking about writing a book for years, but I didn't know what I had to say. And then as soon as I had that aha of like, oh my gosh, I know exactly. And I always come from the standpoint of if I had think of the most important person in the world to you, I think of my sons. And if my son came to me and said, Mom, I'm struggling. My first book was called Winning in Life Now, How to Break Through to a Happier You. So if I wanted to write this book, I would sit down and really envision myself with my son. And I have one opportunity to tell him everything I know about being a winner in life. What would I tell him? I'd tell him about goal setting. I'm telling him about self-esteem. I tell him about faith, family, all of those things. And then because when you think of it as just sharing what you know to help someone, you just feel stuff out like that. When you sit down and write a book, it's a little bit harder, but your book is what you already know. So you just have to come from the perspective of what am I needing to share, get it out. And then again, an editor can make everything sound better. The more you write, the less expensive it is. But obviously, if you need help in that area, there are resources. So don't let that hold you back.
Right, the internet, and you had mentioned this on your book. Like when you Google anything, there's like thousands and thousands of results with tutorials, how to, YouTube videos,
Yes.
podcasts, and so
Yes.
it's just stop giving excuses about like I don't know how to write a book, right? So
Right.
let's talk quickly about just I like to talk about prices because I think a
Mhm.
lot of the not knowing comes with oh I don't have the money, it's too
Right.
expensive, and
Right.
so let's talk about actually let's just double check the minimum is you wrote a book in 3 weeks, but how long just the normal process takes to write to publish?
Once a book is written, once the manuscript is written, meaning like the first draft, generally, we always say conservatively, you can hold a book in a hand within 4 to 6 months. Now, does it go quicker than that? Sure. But a lot of it depends on the author's availability. So that's why we try to be conservative on that. But we've had books get written and published within 45 days. We've had other books that have taken 2 years
Mm.
because, if an author doesn't make it a priority, then it can be postponed. But the process doesn't need to take that long. And anything can be found out how to do online. And there are three options for publishing. And I think that was kind of leading into your next question of the price, because a lot of it does depend on I always say to people, there's no right or wrong way to publish a book. It's just going to depend on the goals for the book and how much time and money you want to invest. If you don't want to put much time into it, then you're going to want to outsource that. And you're going to want to work with a publisher that's just going to do it all for you. Will you pay more for that? Of course, because you're outsourcing it. If your budget is so tight and you're willing to take on the work and learn the process and really get your hands dirty, then you should self-publish. Because at the end of the day, if done right, you will have the same product. It's just how to get there. So cost-wise, let's say you were to work with a traditional publisher, traditional meaning the big boys like the Thomas Nelsons, the Penguins, which by the way, if you're a first time author, the likelihood of you getting picked up is extremely low. And that's a whole other podcast why, but let's just say if you go that route, more than likely you don't have to put money in. They're going to pay for the editors, the designers, and all of that. Now they're going to take 80 to 90% of your profit. But again, that's a whole other story. For most of us first-time authors in nonfiction, you're going to want to self-publish or work with a hybrid publisher. Hybrid publishing means that you're going to get the same exact quality of a traditional publisher. They're going to do all the work for you. So you don't need to figure out how to do registrations of ISBNs. You don't need to go find editors. You don't need to do all of
ISBNs
that.
being...
ISBN is the registration that all books have to have. It's literally the number and barcode that's on the back of all books. Just some of the little details that no matter how you publish, you have to have those things done. But a hybrid publisher and a traditional, they'll do that for you. But if you were to do hybrid, they're gonna do everything. But like in our company's case, our authors keep 100% of their profit and they keep 100% of their royalties. So they get the benefits of self-publishing, but they don't have to do the hard work. So self-publishing, you're doing it all. So you've got to learn the process. You've got to go find the editors, the designers. You've got to find a printer. You've got to do registrations. You have to do distributions. You have to do all of those things. It's not rocket science though. And it can be done once you learn the process. So cost-wise, you can self-publish for, I mean, as little as couple $1,000, but $2,000 to $5,000 is probably about what you could potentially do outside of printing. So that's one option. If you were to work with a hybrid publishers can average or range anywhere from, 10 to 30,000, depending on who you're working with. We definitely fall in the low end of that. And then again, traditional is a different model. So if you have more time than money, self-publish. If you're willing to invest more money to save your time, then you want to work with a hybrid publisher.
Okay, that's good, because I always love to hear about costs specifically, because sometimes a lot of people may not be considering a book because they think, oh, it's a lot of money. So if working with you is just, okay, take some things off my plate, I will research this and just kind of make that a reality. And also, I think, honestly, just like podcasting as well, is like writing a book is not spending money, is investing in growth for your business. Is thinking about the future. It's like, I'm investing this in myself so that I can then make more money, or that it's kind of like, I feel like it's a necessary step to growing your business.
And the money doesn't come from selling books. You will sell books, you will make money there, but the money comes from the opportunities that are attracted. Because again, meeting planners, they want speakers with books. Podcasters, they want authorities, and most of them want people who have written books. So if you really want to build your brand, build your business, then a book is one of the easiest ways to do that. So it is an investment. And if most of the time, like our authors, one speaking event more than pays for their time working with us. So it really just depends why you're doing it. And that's why I always ask, that's my first question, no matter who I talk to, because we're not a fit for everyone. If your only goal is to sell books, it's an uphill battle. The average first-time author sells 500 books.
Wow, that's interesting.
So if your only goal, now could you sell more? Of course, but if you're going to invest a lot of dollars to market to sell a $20 book, is that the best marketing, or is the better marketing to take that content, do a podcast, build a digital course, get out there speaking, consulting, make $10,000? That's how those are the kind of authors we work with, those that want to build their platform.
Okay. So we're nearly at the end of this interview, and I have just two questions. Yes. One, should people be worried about intellectual property? Who owns things when they're quoting people, when they're like doing a podcast that is based on interviews? Just on a quick, short answer, what would you say to people that say, I want to highlight what my guest said, but what do I do?
Yes, you have to have permission, without a doubt. And anyone with a podcast, you should be asking for releases anyway. But if it is in writing and it is not quoted exactly, you 100% have to get permission. And I would recommend not adding content that is not quoted exactly the way they have said it before, or without written permission.
Perfect. That's so good, because I was thinking about this, because I'm just a geek on making things by the book and making sure that, it's right, so you don't have trouble down the line.
Yes.
And so just quickly before we close this interview, I would like to talk about a little bit about how you transition your own podcast. And I think that's so important, because your first show, when you and I were working together, it was called The Power of Authority. And you were talking to authors and big names. I mean, wasn't your first guest Tom Ziegler?
Yes, Tom
Right.
Ziegler and Kevin Harrington and Howard Partridge and people that have really they've leveraged their story to build their authority. And I really wanted to kind of highlight that. But I did make a conscious decision. However, it was more forced because of COVID. So when I started working with you, when I made the decision to do the podcast, I specifically wanted to be in studio because I do believe in repurposing content, and I wanted the video content more than anything, truthfully. And so I leveraged my network to start those first shows. Before COVID hit, we only did 7 shows, believe it or not.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then because it was, and then you left us, but no.
Yes, that's true. You were literally I think one of my last podcasts before I launched the podcast space.
Yeah.
So
And I
it
would
was
have,
sad.
it was, but I would have continued down that model. But with COVID, we couldn't go into a studio for months and months. And then when it was finally, able to do that, a lot of my guests that I'd already pre-booked weren't comfortable. So I just paused the show for about 2 years and then just decided to bring it back with the change of, I don't really want, I love, and I have a network of people that I can talk to that are already out there leveraging their authority. But my heart is for people who are like me, who don't necessarily have that platform yet, but they're wanting one. So I'm talking to business owners or people that have started a ministry or nonprofits that they're really looking to figure out a way to get that authority. Maybe they want to start a podcast, or maybe they, want to be a speaker. And so I'm helping them to put a spotlight on what they're doing because they are making a difference, but maybe they don't have the platform yet for people to know about it. So it's to help them build that platform. But then too, I'm also looking at this as an opportunity I'm not going out to events anymore. And I love to connect with people and help them to see the possibility. And so if I meet somebody on my show who has a great message, maybe I can inspire them to write a book or start a podcast or do something. So it kind of has dual purpose. And I really want to highlight and encourage other listeners that, look, you can start from anywhere and be successful, but maybe there might be some more things we could do to help you build that authority more.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, the people that you're highlighting, they're not authors yet, but they can go in so many different ways. So you're using it
Yeah.
for networking, lead generation, warming up leads. It's just such a different way to see podcasting that is kind of like, hey, maybe I want to shift my podcast idea into something that serves my business better now in this new era, or now in
Yeah.
this new phase of my life that I want to do less studio things. So I want to
Yes.
just talk to more the regular person. So I love that you did that.
Yeah, thank you. And I just think back to when I was getting started, I couldn't relate to the person who was already really, really successful because that seems so far from me. So I love to bring people together, like, look, and encourage people, like, if I can do this, you can do this. And if they can do this, you can do this. And so hopefully that's what the Power of Authority Spotlight will do, is shine the light on people making a difference and help them to build that bigger platform.
I love that. So that's the name of the podcast that everyone can find on any podcast platform. And then if they want to work with you, Michelle, you have a couple of ways that people can work. You have your events, you have your publishing company. So tell us how they can find you and work with you.
Absolutely. So the publishing company side of it, we do free strategy calls. So if you're not sure if you have a story or if you're kind of kicking around ideas, take advantage of that. We're happy to talk to you and see if there is maybe a potential for you to write a book. And you could just go to performancepublishinggroup.com, and there's that button to just schedule that free call.
Or be a podcast guest on your show
Or
as
be
well,
a podcast.
right?
Yes. In fact, on that same page, or on that same website, there's information about the podcast. We are always looking for guests that are making it, that are successful, but they're doing it with a bigger passion and a bigger purpose behind what they're doing.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us and enlighten this big thing that is writing a book that isn't that hard, is achievable for anyone. And so thanks, Michelle. And we'll have more details about everything we discussed in this interview on the description. So find anything that you need through there. All right. Have
Thank
a
you
great
so
day.
much.